Well, he's spoken out against everything from torture at Guantanamo Bay to U.S. policy in Israel and much, much more. His name is LowKey. He's a musician, a poet, a playwright, and a political activist of English and Iraqi descent. He uses his music to get across important political messages. Here's a sample. It's from his song called Terrorist.
It's like the definition didn't ever exist. I guess it's all just a dependent who your nemesis is. Irrelevant how eloquent the rhetoric peddler is. They're telling fibs now, tell us who the terrorist is. They're calling me a terrorist, like they don't know who the terror is. When they put it on me, I tell them this. I'm all about peace and love. Peace and love. They're calling me a terrorist.
Well, once again, he is speaking out, this time to RT, about Egypt and the people there who continue to fight to change the future.
This is not just a revolt against a dictatorship which has inflicted an inhumane level of poverty upon the Egyptian people. It is also a revolt against US imperialism and a revolt against US neo-colonial interests in the region as a whole. But it's also a revolt against Israel's wishes to keep the people of Egypt subservient. That subservience to Israel is being rejected as we speak.
So you think when you hear, for example, President Obama talk about the need for a democracy or also, you know, supporting the protesters there, that there's a little more to that than people really understand?
Well, I think, of course, because when they're talking about this phrase democracy activist, it's important to understand that throughout the 30 years of this dictatorship, these democracy activists have had bullets from American guns shot into them by Egyptian torturers and Egyptian security forces who were trained by the United States and fully backed by the United States. And these democracy activists, as we speak, that are in Liberation Square, are having their pictures taken by the state security and state television and by media all over the world, and those democracy activists are being targeted, but they are being targeted with the full support of the United States. What the United States is trying to do at this stage is maintain the status quo, but change the face. They want a more acceptable face to the exact same status quo, and the people are rejecting that status quo. It is that status quo that they are revolting against, and they will not allow this revolution to be co-opted and shock doctrined.
Let's go back a little bit and talk about some of the factors leading up to the situation in Egypt. I mean, in addition to simple frustration, there seems to be a lot of other factors keeping the momentum of these people strong. What do you see as some of the most significant of these?
Well, I think, of course, the poverty is a major factor, but it's also important to realize that coming out of Washington, there's been a lot of talk about the will of the people. Well, it's important to realize that Hosni Mubarak was brought in to go against the will of the people, because Sadat, when he went to Camp David, was going against the will of the people. The will of the people is not subservience to Israel. And this is something that for 30 years has been a scar upon the Egyptian people. And I think that they are definitely revolting against that.
And I want to also...
And that's not the change...
Oh, sorry, you can finish.
Sorry?
Well, let's talk not only about...
Well, I was going to say the outcome... the outcome of this revolution will not be a change in face and a maintaining of the status quo. The status quo has to change and will change.
So what do you think the outcome will be then? What will it look like in 2 months, 2 years, 20 years from now there?
Well, the outcome will be and has to be an independent and dignified Egypt.
All right. Let's talk also not just about Egypt, but some of the policies that got the U.S. to the point of being so looked down upon, in some cases despised by other nations. What are some of these policies? And even if some of them were to change, what would it take to get back in the good graces of the majority of the rest of the world?
Well, I think would be addressing the legitimate grievances that people have, and the legitimate grievances that people have are the dictatorships which are being propped up. And it's important to realize one more thing, that the regional military dominance of the United States and the expansion of Israel, because this is what Israel is doing. It's expanding as we speak, over 500,000 settlers in the West Bank, that this expansion and this regional dominance militarily by the United States is reliant and dependent upon the dictatorships that rule the Arab world, quote unquote, with an iron fist and repress the will of the people. Now, the way the United States can actually address these issues is by actually acting upon the will of the people. Now, if the will of the people in this region was realized and adhered to, there wouldn't be one US military base in the region. The Palestinians would have their right of return, which is their right under international law. This would be observed. You know, there are a million different grievances people have, but they do not wish their countries to be occupied with military bases.
That was rapper LowKey joining me from London, England.